All right, this Ask HershNoeie is actually today is Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving. I put up a video of what we were doing yesterday for Thanksgiving, and that video was just of Noel cooking mainly, and me stirring mainly. That was it. That's kind of the extent of what I do on Thanksgiving. We obviously dress up a little bit more on Thanksgiving. It's just kind of a tradition that we've been doing. We've actually celebrated, and I put on Facebook, and I'll get to this Ask HershNoeie, but I put on Facebook that, because of the sickness, and this person talks about the sickness too, but because of the sickness, a lot of people are not able to travel. I mean, folks still are, but some folks are staying home and they're stressing about it. It's making them depressed and a lot of different issues because they haven't had to stay home during the holidays, and it's really unfortunate. And I said, this is nothing new for us. We we never have family or friends during the holidays, during Thanksgiving or anything like that. Like, we're always here. So, and then the people that are friends, they have their own families and stuff like that. So we've been together for what, 11 years, 12 years. That whole time we've never had family or friends over. So I think that I take that back. Back when we were in Indiana, we would go and visit my mom on Thanksgiving, but that would be about it. And so I haven't lived in Indiana for well over 6 years. So it gives you an idea. So for 6, 7 years, it's just been us. So this is nothing new. And, we have created our own little traditions and things like that. And it's been really amazing. So one of them is obviously dressing up. Noelle tries to do some of the same things that my mom used to do in terms of things that she cooks and how she cooks things. So it's really, really nice. It's pretty cool. So that's what we're doing now. But this is an Ask HershNoeie that talks about, this person says that she's from, and I might be butchering the name, Kearney, Nebraska. And she states that she moved here based on my videos. She says, "Hi, HershNoeie." She mentions her name. "I am from Kearney, Nebraska. I work as a nurse. I decided to move to Tacoma to have a new change in life. I started seeing your videos and became a lot more interested in where to live out west. I wanted a place that wasn't super expensive, and at first was looking at California. You've informed me so much about Tacoma. I have since moved here about a year ago, and prior to the sickness," she mentions what it is. I still don't know if I can say it or not. Some people do. Some YouTubers do, and they're fine. But one time I did, and it was demonetized, so I don't want to go down that road. But anyway, she says that she moved here prior to the sickness, and as soon as she got here, everything kind of went chaotic because of the sickness. Her question is, "You've told us so much about some of the history of Tacoma, but a lot of the present of Tacoma. What is going to be the future, in your opinion, of Tacoma? Where will this city change and evolve between now and the year 2030? Dang. That's a good question. Sorry for the red eye. I know I keep telling you guys that. Red eye, red eye. I'm not sick at all. We don't go anywhere for me to be sick. It's just typically allergies and things like that. But in the next 10 years, that's a really good question. I think that there are a few areas that Tacoma will start to kind of evolve into, and it's starting to do that now. One's going to be transportation. The second one is going to be in water, believe it or not. The third one is going to be, it was on the tip of my tongue. Let me see if I can remember it. I'm probably going to forget it, but it's one of those key areas that I think you're going to see. I also think you're going to obviously see a changing skyline. Now, aside from the fact that there's going to be a whole lot more people obviously move down here, the population definitely will surge. There are a lot of people doing exactly what you've done. And they've moved from one place to here, and they're coming from a completely different state. I think you're going to see much more of that happening, and you're going to see a lot of folks coming from Seattle down to Tacoma. It's really changing the vibe of the city, and I think it's going to be accelerated after the sickness is done. But I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I've had so many people now ask me, I'm not a realtor, but I have had a lot of people ask me about homes and finding them a home and finding them a place, and giving me a lot of details and information that I'm not even supposed to have. Like, I can't run your credit, you know what I mean? But I've had a lot of people do that, and they're really, really curious about getting a house here because they're coming from someplace else and they watch these videos, or they're passing by and they watch videos, and so they're really wanting to hop on it as quick as possible, because right now is the buying period for homes, just in general, because it's the colder months. People hardly want to go around and start buying, but the difference is here it's different, because even with the colder months, even with the sickness, even with a lot of things, homes are still selling fast here. When I say here, I'm talking about the whole region, but especially down in Tacoma, much faster than what you're going to see up in Seattle. The prices are a lot more affordable. That is going to quickly change, and I think a lot of people like yourself got in at the right time. Now, other people would look at that and say it's not the right time because the prices that you paid if you got here a year ago are still high. However, if you look at today versus what you probably paid, the house that you bought is going to be much more expensive, right? So you now work here at one of the hospitals. She goes on to say that the job that she got here pays more starting out than what she did as a nurse back in Nebraska. She had been a nurse there for 10 years. So the starting salary here is much more than what she got when she was working there in Nebraska. And she says now she makes a whole lot more than what she did. So it was a good move. And that's one of the things that is important. And that's a completely separate video that I'm going down the rabbit hole on. But a lot of people find out, like, yeah, coming from some of these other places, you come here, the salary is going to be a lot bigger. If you're coming from Seattle down here, it may not be. People are a little bit depressed when they see the salary differences from Seattle versus here. But coming from some of these other places, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But where do I see the city besides just population and things like that? Let me first talk about skyline. I think what you're going to see is an era where the city starts to build up. And I'm not saying in the same fast, accelerated pace that you see in Seattle or even in Bellevue, but I think that you're going to start seeing more buildings definitely pop up that change the skyline of the city. Obviously, because there's just more interest in folks wanting to live here, but also there's more interest in businesses that want to relocate or even start up here. So I think you're going to start seeing a definite change in the skyline between now and in 2030. I mean, if you look at from 2010 to 2020, the skyline didn't really change much except for one building. And that one building that changed it, that you can really notice. I mean, there's buildings that popped up, don't get me wrong, but there are a lot of mid-rises. But that building that popped up right at the end of 2020 is the Marriott Hotel. That's been the only building of size that popped up, and it's 22 stories. But I think you're going to see a couple more of those type of buildings between now and 2030. It popped in my head what it is that I was thinking about. The other thing that you're going to see in the next 10 years is a technology surge. I think that Tacoma is a hidden gem when it comes to technology and IT companies. You see a lot of focus up in Seattle, and you're sitting in Bellevue and Redmond and all these upper areas, but you don't really hear a lot mentioned about Tacoma. And there is a movement here of not only in terms of just getting more businesses to start here or to locate here or whatnot, to slow down the amount of people having to leave and go to a different county and get jobs and come back, but you're starting to see a lot of technology companies that have come here from other states and have located down in Tacoma, and they're really just kind of been kind of quiet. You have over a dozen different companies that now have just kind of merged on the scene of Tacoma and have really started to plant their own roots. And so some of them are bigger than others. There are others who were skeptical of Tacoma. They really weren't sure, and now they're like, "I this is the place I want to be." And so I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of those types of companies like Infoblock and Humming and different things like that. You're going to see a lot more of those types of companies that are choosing Tacoma over some of these other places, mainly for the simple fact that there's a better quality of life. I've been saying that. And I think also just the cost of living is a lot less. The cost of everything is a lot less, office space. So you're going to start seeing that there's already, like I said, a movement going on in terms of aiming for startups. And so there are a few different organizations down here making that heavy push. So I do think that you're going to start seeing a lot more birth and creation of new technology companies. But I also think you're going to start seeing a lot of companies that have been around for a while starting to locate or at least put an office or two down here in Tacoma, definitely between now and the next 10 years. I see that happening for sure. The water situation. Tacoma doesn't really use its resources well. One of the biggest resources that we have is water. And I'm not talking about like drinking water, that type of thing. I'm talking about if you look at Commencement Bay, which is sitting directly in front of Tacoma, the only thing we really use that bay for, mainly, is for our port. Ships come and go. It's a very big port. It's the biggest port in the Pacific Northwest. It's bigger than what you see up in Seattle. So we utilize that very well. It still has room to grow, and it definitely will. But we don't use it for other things that could really and truly set us apart from other places. And I think that that's also an area that's being pushed. We don't have a lot of shipbuilders here. We don't really you see that up in Seattle. You don't see it as much down here. We don't have a lot of cruises that leave from here and come back. There is a company that kind of makes a stop here. They make a stop in Olympia. They make a stop up in Seattle, and they're charging $4,000, to do that. But it's a smaller ship. It's not like the big giant ones that you see that go to the Bahamas, but it's still fairly big. But I think that you're going to probably start seeing more of that happening, just because of the simple fact that the South Sound is pretty neglected when it comes to just that type of opportunity and everything else. Seattle is becoming very clogged in many aspects. So I think you're going to start seeing probably more of that. We used to have what's called the mosquito fleet of different little boats that were ferries that took you all over the place. I don't know if we're going to see that type of activity again, but I do think what you're going to see in terms of water is more water transportation. Again, getting from Tacoma up to the north and maybe even down to the south, just because of the simple fact that the water is a lot faster in many instances than the roadway system. The reason why those old mosquito fleets went away was because of the car. It was just faster. Once the automobile became a little bit more mainstream, people really didn't take those boats, and they were slow, and it just didn't make practical sense. And so now the reverse is happening because the highways are so bottled that it is probably a lot faster, a lot easier, a lot less stressful to take a completely different way into the city. So I think you're going to see, at least, and there's been a push for that. There's been talk of that, but I think that you're going to see more of a push to make that happen between now and 2010, because there's just no other way. You can't expand the interstate. In other cities like my hometown, Bowling Green, Kentucky, they just now made the interstate all the way through the city. So from Tennessee line up to before you get to Elizabethtown, I think we're around Horse Cave, maybe Cave City, Kentucky. It's 6 lanes. It's a 6 lane interstate, and so the whole idea was for I-65 to be 6 lanes all the way, because once you leave Elizabethtown, it becomes just 2 lanes, or actually it's a 4 lane highway, but just 2 lanes going in either direction. And so they've been making this push to make it a 6 lane interstate all the way through the state of Kentucky for I-65, because you have these big population clusters. You have an anchor to the north, which is Louisville, Kentucky, and then you have a smattering of other smaller cities, and then you have Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is an anchor to the south. Bowling Green, Kentucky is now the third largest city in the state, and so it's only getting bigger and bigger and bigger every single day, literally. It's the fastest growing, I believe. I know at one time it's the fastest growing city in the state. So there was a need to make that actually happen. There you can keep expanding the interstate, right? Here you can't keep expanding the interstate. It's maxed out. I mean, there's been talk about putting a lid on top of the of I-5 and making the bottom one direction, the top a completely different direction. But it's just not really going to happen. So I think that having some other alternative using water is probably going to be a reality. Transportation. Now, I talked about water being one of those things, but obviously I think that Tacoma is going to get more into the transportation age. The city, because of its proximity to Seattle, has a lot of benefits other places just don't have. Seattle has actually pushed this entire region forward, the entire state, but it's really pushed the entire region forward. You're seeing things happen here that normally would not happen in other places. You have a city that is very dense and it's growing literally by the second. And so you're seeing cities that normally would never be a big deal, right? Bellevue would not be Bellevue if it wasn't for Seattle, obviously. You would just have a small, little, tiny little town, and that would be it. You wouldn't have a Manhattan like what you have today. Tacoma would be a port city, but you would not have a city that is as strong as it is if it wasn't for Seattle. I mean, these are facts. It would still be a strong city because it's a port city. It's, on the West Coast. But Seattle has really pushed it forward in terms of things like light rail. You're seeing in cities like this that has a streetcar system that is bigger than what you see in many other places. In fact, if you look at places like Indianapolis, for example, or Columbus, Ohio, they're by far bigger than Tacoma. They're like at least sometimes 3-5 times bigger. But what you're not seeing is in those two cities a streetcar network. You're not seeing that. You're seeing a streetcar system go through downtown, and it has become just a common normal thing. We're actually expanding it, and it's going to eventually go even further. So I think that obviously between now and 2030, the system is going to be complete to Hilltop, and then the work and planning is going to be for it to extend even further to our south. So, and I talked about that in the video. So that's definitely going to happen. But also the light rail system connecting Seattle down to Tacoma will be at that point ready to go, right? It'll be right at that point is when that actually starts. The BRT system here is going to be developed in the next couple of years, actually. So that's going to be inside of 2030, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see more BRT lines spread throughout the city because it is becoming that densely populated. Keep in mind, Tacoma is not going to be Tacoma that you see today, just based on the population projections. It's just not going to be what you see today. You're going to see a much more densely packed city. There are people who don't want that. I know a lot of folks who have lived here their whole lives who don't really want that. Excuse me, but it's gonna happen, and you can't expect a city to not grow just to hold on to the things that are near and dear. But you're starting to see the city move further and further and further into the direction of a micro Bellevue. And I think that when you couple that with other things that I mentioned in terms of the technology era, you're going to see some things here that are going to really rapidly change the city. Will it keep its charm and character? Hopefully, hopefully, but it's going to definitely change for sure. The other part of this, in terms of what to expect in the next 10 years, or what do I think is going to be more likely to happen, definitely in the next 10 years, is in terms of transportation, also involves things like rail. Not just regular commuter rail system expansion with the Sounder or Amtrak or with the light rail system, but I think probably fast, like high speed rail. I do think that's a possibility. America is behind in the high speed rail. There are some people who are saying that high speed rail is already kind of going to fall to the wayside because of things like the Hyperloop. But I do think that you're going to see, excuse me, I do think you're going to see Seattle, Tacoma, and Portland connected. Why? I'll go back to what I said before in terms of just I-5. I-5, you can't really expand it in Tacoma. There's no place to expand it. You can't expand it between Tacoma all the way up into Seattle. It's just there's no place to do it unless you start cutting down the areas beside it, which form the highway. But there's really no way to expand the highway system, the interstate. There's no way to do it. Once you start to leave Tacoma and start heading further south, there's that middle land between here and Tacoma, or here in Portland, where you can expand it, but it's not really needed there. You know what I mean? And then even if you did expand it as much as you wanted to, it's going to be bottlenecked again once you get into Portland. Portland, you can't expand it either. It's just literally gridlock. So it makes a lot of sense for you to have high-speed rail connecting these large population centers. Keep in mind, you would be possibly connecting the state capital there, which is going to be Olympia. But connecting Portland, they're even talking about Eugene, Oregon, Portland, Olympia, Tacoma, and Seattle, and heading to the Canadian border, you have a lot of room there. You have a tremendous amount of room to where you could really start to see why a high-speed rail would make sense. Now, there are many other stops they're wanting to add in there, and then at that point, it's not high-speed rail, in my opinion. To me, high-speed rail should have very few stops, and they want to stop at almost every city, and it doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, so I think that you probably will see a push for that, or maybe even Hyperloop. But I think that you're going to see this area be much more connected than what it is. Not only in terms of just a smaller scale, in terms of connecting cities near Tacoma, like little suburbs, but also regionally, I think you're going to see Tacoma being connected better to places like Everett and Marysville and Snoqualmie and all of those places, Issaquah. I think you're going to see a better connectivity in terms of that. But also when we talk about the whole kind of the Cascadia region, I think you're going to see a lot of connectivity there too, because this entire area is like an ecosystem, really. So yeah, I definitely think you're going to see much more of that happen probably in the next 10 years. So yeah, I think that the fact that you moved here is really the best time. There are other people who are asking about houses and that type of thing. I would say your best bet is obviously get a realtor. Make sure everything's ready to go. Make sure you have enough money to do what you need to do. It is a fight down here. You have a lot of folks from Seattle, a lot of people from California that have a very big wallet. And so it is difficult. A lot of people who want to upgrade, and we're one of those. We want to upgrade our home, but we can't, because the problem is that you put the house on the market and it sells within a couple of days. So then you got to be out of the house. But where do you go? Because then you're in the rat race of trying to find a house and beat out other bidders. So it becomes this chronic situation where there are a lot of people who want to upgrade their homes or move to a different little area, but they really can't because the competition's so high, and that you're not going to get something. You see what I'm saying? Like, you may bid on a house and whatnot, and probably offer a very good price. Let's say a house is 400,000, you offer 430,000. But someone says, you know what, I'm going to give you 425 in cash, then you're done. Like, you've lost. So you have stuff like that happens. You have 30, 40, 50 people, 60 people that are all interested in one house, and it becomes a difficult situation. So I think that Tacoma is at a crossroads. It really and truly is, to the point of where they're looking for outside help as to what to do. Like, what do we do? And one of the big areas they're focusing on is the middle housing section, right? Not so much single family homes, we have enough of those, and not necessarily even mid-rises because the cost is so expensive, but the middle section of homes, or the middle section of housing, which is duplexes, fourplexes, triplexes, courtyard style housing, and things like that. Things that can have a good, decent scalability and density, but not necessarily been a mid-rise because of the cost, for one, for the developer, two, just the time frame it takes to actually build those things. All of that is coming into play. The city is really starting to fall behind in terms of housing because the influx of people is so high. It's becoming a big problem. So a lot of the houses you see, and there's still land. There's vacant land in Tacoma. Even they're building a 911 headquarters here. And across the street from that is a big plot of land that is vacant. There's nothing on it. And so that would be an area where the city could easily, if they were smart, buy that land, wait for a developer to develop that middle housing type deal where you have these different styles of houses, create a village there of maybe, I don't know, 200 homes, 200 individual units for people to actually buy. Not necessarily single family homes, but 200 residences. That would do a wonders, right? That would do a wonders. But we'll see what happens. I think that the city is really in a difficult position because developers don't want to build the 40-story condos that you see up in Seattle and Bellevue, because the costs to build them are the same, but the money that they're going to get from people is not going to be the same. So they're looking at it from a dollars and cents perspective. That will change. But in the meantime, it's just a very difficult period because there's not enough supply. The price is very low for some. It's starting to push other people out. You're starting to see people who have been here their whole lives being pushed down to places like Olympia or even farther away if they're wanting to buy a house. And even if they wanted to rent, you're starting to see people say, you know what, that rent is no longer viable for me. I don't need $800 anymore for a 2-bedroom house. I'm going to start charging you $1,400 or $1,600. Why? Because they're able to do it. Sorry, I'm all nasally now. It's much more affordable to buy a house because of the simple fact you're getting property that's your own, getting more bang for your buck. The prices, your monthly payment's going to probably be a lot cheaper. It's all about your credit. All those things come into play, but it's a bad situation. I would have to say that every single month it's getting worse and worse and worse in terms of competition. Even a sickness, a pandemic cannot slow it down. It didn't slow it down at all. It didn't slow down. And when we bought this house, it was already starting to get bad. The house next to us went into foreclosure and they sold it for a very low price. You now have I think there's like 50, 60 different cars. It was so bad that the traffic out here was blocked. You couldn't even go down the street because there were so many people parking way down the street, walking up just for one house. I don't know how much they paid or if they paid it in cash or what they did, but it was literally a chaotic mess because finding homes here is very hard. And the folks that do have them are holding on to them because even if they wanted to sell, where would they go? Because it's just going to be, you're going to be a part of that whole mix of issues. So Anyhow, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you join the Discord, which is going to be down in the description box below. I can definitely talk to you more about different things. We have people that go on there and ask me questions or opinions or whatnot. It's personalized because I can talk to you in real time. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe. Have a safe Thanksgiving. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.